The week before the closing filing is when insurance collapse stories get rewritten in plain sight. Not with a sudden storm, with a scheduled window. If you've ever wondered whether insurers failed overnight, here's the uncomfortable question. What changed in the insurance story during the week before the closing filing? Was it the numbers, the reinsurance, or the intent? Watch the document trail. Because in that final week, small edits can shift blame, change apparent solvency, and make collapse look engineered long after the decision was already made. Closing filings are the moment everyone hardens an explanation. Earlier drafts can be fluid, assumptions, estimates, management narratives. But the closing submission compresses everything into a single set of facts: reserves, reinsurance recoverables, claim handling descriptions, and the language that tells regulators why things look the way they do. That compression matters. When timelines compress, inconsistencies become evidence. If the story changes near the end, the why has to be consistent with earlier reasoning, or it doesn't. And that's where controlled outrage comes from. Not that things got worse, but that they were positioned. Let's map the document chain you should look for. The closing package usually sits on top of interim reports, reserve schedules, and correspondence with internal risk committees. Under that, you'll often find reinsurance agreements or amendments, including schedules of recoverables and counterparty credit language. Then come claim handling protocols and adjuster guidance memos that explain how reported claims were valued. Finally, you get the actual closing submission package, the formatted tables, the accounting presentation choices, and the narrative that ties it all together. The story is not just what happened, it's what the closing filing claims happened. Now the week window. The last week is rarely one big change. It's a sequence. Day 1, reserve methodologies look clarified, not altered. Day 2, reinsurance recoverables get reclassified from one bucket to another. Same totals, different story. Day 3, claim valuation language tightens, often swapping best estimate phrasing for actuarially supported ranges. Day 4 and 5, amendments surface. Sometimes they're described as administrative, but their timing is the clue. Day 6, sign-offs. Day 7, the closing package locks. When you line up versions by date, the movement becomes visible. Here's the money trail map, cash flow style. Premiums flow in, claims flow out. Reserves sit in the middle as the promise of future claims funding. Reinsurance recoverables represent the expected reimbursement when those promises are fulfilled. Reserve adjustments and reinsurance recoverables move in the same direction for the same reasons. In a manipulated narrative, the trail thins. Reserves may be increased or relabeled, while collectability of reinsurance recoverables is made more optimistic. Or vice versa, recoverables get discounted to create losses, while reclassification makes those losses appear unavoidable. The question is not what changed, it's where did the money story stop making sense. This is how reframing mechanisms work. Accounting presentation and reserve methodology can shift culpability narratives without changing headline totals. For example, a reserve may be moved from incurred but not reported into a different category with a different disclosure requirement. Or a methodology note may be updated to justify a new range. A subtle example. Before, a schedule might say recoverables are estimated based on expected recoveries. After, the closing filing might say recoverables are considered collectible as per contractual terms. That one phrase can reposition intent. It can make the outcome look like compliance, not planning. So was it the numbers, the reinsurance, or the intent? In many cases, it's all three, but the intent is revealed by timing and linkage. Counter-evidence checks keep you from being hypnotized by the last week's story. Start by pulling earlier filings, prior quarterly submissions, interim reserve disclosures, ORD materials, and any risk committee packs from the month before. Cross-reference. Did the methodology really change in the final week, or did it already exist in earlier drafts? Did reinsurance collectability assumptions appear earlier, or do they appear only when the closing filing needs them? If the closing narrative says new information emerged, Check whether those facts were internal knowledge already. Contradictions are the compass. If the closing filing claims uncertainty, but earlier documents treated the outcome as decided, you found a crack. Red flag patterns are consistent across cases. 1. Timing of amendments. When documents are amended days before submission, it raises the question of whether the amendment is a correction or a repositioning. 2. Technical reserve jumps. Look for jumps that are described as model refinements rather than economic changes. 3. Late documentation bursts. If memos, emails, or actuarial summaries appear to be created at the edge of the deadline, the paper trails can become a choreography. 4. Narrative overreach. If the closing filing uses language that wasn't used earlier, like complied with or contractual collectability, and the supporting schedules change right after, you're not looking at a mistake. You're looking at messaging with accounting behind it. What investigators likely target is rarely the table alone. They target motive and knowledge indicators. Who reviewed the changes? Were they reviewed by the same leadership that later signed off? Did internal reviewers raise concerns earlier? And if so, where are those concerns in the paper trail? Look for sign-off chains, actuarial sign-offs, accounting sign-offs, risk committee approvals, legal review, and management certification drafts. Then, ask whether warnings existed earlier, missed premium collection targets, deteriorating loss ratios, reinsurer disputes, or prior model limitations. If the final week introduces new reassurance about collectability, but earlier materials showed friction, intent becomes a plausible inference. So here's the question that lands. If the paper moved in the final week, what else was already decided? If reserves shift presentation near closing, but earlier filings show a stable view, it suggests reframing rather than discovery. If reinsurance recoverables are reclassified near closing, but earlier documents reflect lower confidence, it suggests narrative engineering. And if sign-offs cluster around deadline dates, the intent signal is not abstract, it's procedural. What changed in the insurance story during the week before the closing filing? Was it the numbers, the reinsurance, or the intent? In the pattern we're describing, it's intent carried by numbers and reinsurance. The intent is what the timeline proves. If you want, comment with the kind of company or filing you're looking at, and I'll share a simple checklist for version comparison. Reserve schedules, reinsurance recoverables, methodology notes, and sign-off dates, so you can spot the final week rewrite before the public story hardens.